Hello, people of Earth. This is David Bernard with the Parallel Perception Podcast with Lujan Matus. This is where we discuss all the things, all of them, and we see how far down the rabbit hole we can go. Today, I have with me once again another student of Loban Pi, another friend, and ally of Lujan Matus. He was on our last podcast. He's on this podcast. We're going to open it up with Joshua King. Thank you for being here. Tell us what your first question is.
Thanks, David. All right, let's see. We were talking a bit in the last one about belief. What I was thinking from that was the idea we touched upon as well as the growth through those challenges. And I'd been learning a bit about the idea of hormesis, and hormesis is this concept that we grow through challenges, and that small amounts of challenges are good. And you can see this in like workouts where the small tears in the muscles, you grow and your muscle actually develops from it. And I was considering whether this was something that actually plays a role in our development, in our practice, potentially in Kung Fu practices and things like this, where the teacher puts enough strain on the student that it doesn't break them. It's not enough that it breaks them, but it's enough that pushes them to rise to the next level. Is that something that you can speak to in some capacity?
No, it's really good because we all develop through crisis. We all grow through crisis, but one crisis is all we really need. Micro crises, in terms of 5 micro crises, will put us down where one big crisis will be something we can just rush into and fix. So it's so to give a really big push, or just a minor crisis, which may be a major area of crisis for somebody when you maybe push on something which is showing a resistance, will flex the emotional body to respond to upheaval, and then to come to terms with yes, that's for sure. And tearing the circumstances so that not to the point where they're destroyed, but to the point where you can put yourself back together, and that the only way that can really occur is to hold space for someone when they're going through some sort of upheaval, which promotes a tremendous amount of change. But and we all do this for each other. If we're really honest, we'll all do this for each other. We have to put on the table what we realize, instead of going along with what's being conveyed without saying anything or causing waves. If we can all learn to communicate through those not blockages, but through like going along the road, which is you're going like this, you know exactly that you're going to expect an up, and then you expect a down, and up and down. I think this is just life itself. And I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but not only does a teacher maybe push for a crisis to occur, but the teacher is under undue duress before that crisis happens, because it has to be given back so that they can understand the oscillating power of an empty person. Will understand that they need to give this back because it's destructive. And when you give that destructive energy back, or that deranged energy back, then there's obviously the person will experience crisis, because that's what they want to impose upon somebody else as a teacher, or somebody else as a friend. So I think that's just a natural process.
So is that like the teachers being a mirror then, and reflecting back to them what they're potentially putting out? Yeah, the teacher has to be an absolute mirror, so that the teacher can't exist internally. So to be empathically inclined is to not have a mind, and that mind doesn't have an automated cerebral response in terms of subjectivity. The energy goes into the heart, and then is felt and oscillates and moves through the heart region and comes out the throat, so that the teacher can be taught what they've realized by listening to what they're saying. Because when something goes in as units of information, it's either interpreted through the oscillation of a feeling which is
beneath what's been achieved. So then you try to bring that lower belief system into a higher oscillation. And there's always oscillations which challenge the new belief system or the new realization. I shouldn't really say belief system, but the new oscillation of circumstances, so that we can evolve and become harmonious until God reveals everything in front of you and between you. Yeah. And that's the manifest and unmanifest, or the unseen and the seen, or there's fullness within emptiness, and the emptiness within fullness. Yeah.
I guess another aspect of that I've come across is that the idea that suffering is necessary in order for us to grow. And I've heard both sides of the story, because other people will say, well, no, suffering isn't necessary. However, in my own experience and what I've witnessed around me, there's always seems to be these large leaps in growth when someone is faced with a particular challenge which causes duress. And there's certainly growth in the other direction as well. It just seems to be a lot slower climb.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Growth is promoted by a form of suffering or for a form of discordance to understand where we need to go. So if I receive something, I'm in a state of suffering. This is true. When you receive something, you're in a state of suffering. You have to oscillate and reinterpret that suffering, give it back to the circumstances to stop this from really happening, to go to the next level of harmonization, until there's no suffering, there's just complete understanding, because suffering often indicates that we're separated. So if we're not separated, we become one being, then the world just becomes like a mountain. There's no right nor wrong, yet there's total harmony. Like if somebody walks on that mountain peak and they hurt themselves, they know it's not the mountain's fault. It's just that they made a misjudgment. So there's really no right and wrong when you get to a particular point in your life. There is only harmonization with the universal prospect making itself available to you, and it's just like walking into a rainforest. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll be eaten alive. If you do know what you're doing, then you'll walk harmoniously between all the points that show you that if you do that, then your life will end. And if you listen to the rainforest, then life will continue. So we have to learn to do this between ourselves. And the only area of suffering there would be for beings like this is to accidentally crash, and then go into a lower realm of conscience with a bunch of human beings that that aren't exactly where you are, even though you crashed, and it's very hard for that alien being to actually come to terms with the fact that they're screaming in horror because of these monsters coming towards them from their craft, knowing that the suffering is going to be besetting the harmony because they're in the wrong spot at the wrong time accidentally. So even an advanced civilization will end up suffering terribly at the hands of barbarians.
Kate and I were actually talking about this last night, coincidentally, and we were talking about our upbringings and how I think this is true for everybody, but I think it's especially true for men, that you have to go through this period of being thrown into the fire and getting burned in order to know what it feels like to get burned by a fire, so that the next time you experience fire, you're prepared and you can act with some level of competency. And that's very much what my upbringing was. I was a very soft child. like I had asthma pretty bad for the first 7 years of my life. It got better a little bit over time, and I hardly have it now. I still have it, but it's not on the forefront. I can do things. But so back then I got into crafts and art, and I played the flute, and I did a lot of gentle things. And so it was rare that I was in situations where I was competing with the other boys and kind of expressing my alpha in that kind of a way. And so at some point the extended family decided that I needed to be toughened up, and my dad took me to martial arts, started taking me to martial arts when I was about 10 years old. And I would spar with my dad at 10 and 11 and 12. He said, this is a safe environment. I love you. I'm never going to hurt you. But if you can handle me and somebody that's my size, nobody on the schoolyard is going to be able to hurt you. And so in my framing of this, you know, it's something that I feel, I have competency in scary situations, and B, you know, I'm proud that I survived that experience. But I was having a conversation with my sister where the same thing happened to her, but I was the one sparring with her. And so we're 4 years apart. She started sparring with me when she was about 8. And so I was like 12, I guess, at that time. And it's traumatizing to her. Like, she feels like she didn't feel like she was safe. And I never knew this. Like, I had no awareness that me sparring with her, because dad's in the background, you know, yelling out calls to, you know, uppercut and jab and cross and all these things. It just, I just thought it was for her the same that it was with me and my dad. And I think back, and it wasn't as safe as I thought it was. You know, he was trying out moves on me, and you can see toe marks on the ceiling. And at one point he kneed me in the mouth, and my tooth came through my lip. Like it wasn't totally safe, but you know, these are martial arts that we're training, so it's not supposed to be. And so I was talking to Kate about this, and even though my sister had a traumatic experience of this has definitely affected her relationship with my dad. I was definitely put through the fire, and now I'm recognizing ways that this might have had an impact on my relationship with my father. At the same time, I also realized that, like, it's necessary. It's necessary. And even though we fall down, and even though we build traumatic bodies and maybe resentments and things like that, it seems to be something that if we don't do, you know, the alternative of not having competency and not being able to face fears and not being able to operate in an unsafe world, that can go horribly wrong for everybody. And so that's my testimony. I don't know if I had a question to bring to the table, but like sometimes I find myself not feeling like, you know, excited that I'm on a path that is putting so much pressure on me, and I'm being forced to grow and really expand my comfort zone and really dig deep and become a better version of myself. Sometimes I just feel resentful that I'm having to go through another round of shit, and it's uncomfortable, and it hurts, and it's gonna, you know, I'm sore, and it's gonna take a while to recover and all that kind of stuff. And so I guess if I have a question, Lujan, it would be like compared to my sister's experience and my experience, the same thing, and one person is traumatized, the other person feels, you know, like they benefited from it. Like how do we frame something when we go through those kinds of things? How do we find, I think I know the answer to this, but how do we find the will, the strength, the perspective to turn it into something, you know, that acts as fertilizer for us, as opposed to something that can take us down?
I'd like to hear your answer.
We need somebody to fall into that loves and supports us.
That's it. That's beautiful. I mean, let Josh answer too.
I think he summed it up pretty well. Yeah, it's almost like the nurturing, you know, and whether that is someone else or whether it's you've found a place inside that you can nestle in, because that has been the case for me as well in some of past situations where I didn't necessarily, like, I've always had loving family around me, but maybe I was in a different part of the world, facing some challenges, and it seemed to be that I found a safe place in here where I could always retreat to, and you know, whether it be going out into the gardens or into nature or something like that, but it was always a way that I can connect with the outside world and find that within me as well. So there's a harmonization between that inner and outer world.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, and also too, it's basically your energetic resources will determine how you handle a circumstance. So maybe 1 week you can handle something, and maybe 10 months down the track, virtually the similar sort of situation will come up, and you're energetically crashed, and you won't be able to handle it because your heart is not there to support you in your confidence and the voluminosity of that. So, you know, that's a thing to take into consideration, is our fluctuation of energy that determines how we handle each circumstance. So, yeah, and you know, And as for a perfect world, I really do believe we've got to stand behind each other and do what we can and be true to that. And that's what we're missing as a humanity, to stand behind someone who's going through a crisis, to build a heart resonance to the point that they don't owe you anything, but they love you for supporting them. And it's and not looking at any giving as something that you need something in return. So nobody should expect anything in exchange, but the exchange will be loyalty and love. And that's the only thing that's going to keep our energy upright, is loyalty and love. It's just like Josh said. You need someone to hold you, to take you through the ups and downs of our energetic fluctuations, because we all know we crash, and we all know we're powerful and we can handle, and then the next situation we're overpowerful and destroy the circumstance. So it's either one or the other. But if you're really honest about it,
there's a lot of beauty in that state of vulnerability too. Like, I feel like I spent so much time putting on that harder shell to the outside world and trying to stay strong, and it just was not sustainable. That took a whole lot of energy in itself, and that eventually crumbled. And the more I became okay with being in a vulnerable space and actually being able to communicate that with people that I trusted, the more weight was just lifted off my shoulders.
And you know what too, Joshua, sharing your vulnerabilities with the people you can't trust is a wonderful thing to do, because they give you such deep insights to how nefarious they could possibly be with that vulnerability, and that you learn so much about yourself and the other person as well. So it's I've done this quite often with people that I shouldn't trust, and I know I shouldn't trust, but I give them my vulnerability and I see what they do with me, which reveals a reality which I would have never seen if I didn't do it. So it's quite a strange world we're in when it comes to our dichotomy at the moment, our lack of unity. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting affair.
That's funny, because just as you said that, I realized that you're not really being totally vulnerable until you hand it to the person that you maybe don't trust so much.
Yeah, because that person will show you something quite beautiful about yourself, and quite tragic about them, because you have to forgive them because they don't know they're in the wrong spot, and you give them the opportunity to be totally in the wrong spot or totally there for you, and you will actually benefit from this greatly, because then you'll be able to be kind to their absolute insensitivity and their absolute degradation in terms of their weaknesses. So, and you got to learn to try to love those, because you know that they're lost. Yeah, even if you feel lost when you're giving your vulnerability to the wrong person, you find yourself very, very quickly, because you realize that something quite tremendous is happening in front of you because of what you've done.
That brings up a question about those situations in terms of, I've had a lot of people in my life that have hurt me or let me down or misused my loyalty. There's a lot of wounds that I'm still healing from, that I find myself in a space where I don't have any kind of resentment. In fact, I have gratitude for the relationship that it had and what I learned from it and all those kinds of things. But you don't want to give up on somebody, and assume that they'll never get through the blinders or the biases that they have. And so what kind of space do you hold for people that you've literally hit a wall with? And no matter what you say or how you try to describe it or how you create context, they just can't see from your perspective what it is that you're trying to exchange with them. What kind of space do you hold for those people?
Give them time until there's no time left. And Joshua's got a beautiful look on his face. I do believe you have to walk away from someone that you're going to waste your time with eventually, but you have to give those circumstances a chance. But those circumstances only allow that chance to exist for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you won't survive. And and you need to everybody needs to understand where they need to move on and where they need to stop doing what they're doing. But Joshua had such a beautiful look on his face. I was just wondering what he was realizing while you were talking.
I guess I was a situation had popped up where there was a individual who had been conducting themselves in a way that was not acceptable, and how my non-responsiveness to that had actually allowed, initially it didn't look like anything had changed, but without judging someone, and with sort of seeing them for who they are and the baggage that they're carrying with them, and almost empathizing with the weight that they must be carrying under that load, that compassion towards them and that empathy towards them in some way can affect them to change. And sometimes it can't, but I saw over time this individual started displaying themselves differently, and in some cases they became more open and more loving. Well, maybe not loving's probably a little bit generous, but open to myself, my wife. And then you might see them pivot and direct that towards someone else. But yeah, I was just realizing that not doing anything can evoke that change in someone else, when you're in a space of non-judgment and just understanding, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that the people need to rewind and see the oscillation and the volatility and the beauty of your heart going like this as you're speaking your truth there. The main thing to see is how you're affected by your own realizations in terms of that circumstantial attunement that you were realizing about somebody, and you could hear it in the micro gestures of your voice how that affected you very deeply. So even when we look at this, if you see that, then you virtually see Joshua. But Joshua on a very, very deep level, oscillating and fluctuating here, and the tonality shows your tenderness and your vulnerability towards that circumstance. So it's so even if I say, well, I'm not going to say anything, then noticing that you had a beautiful look on your face, and then noticing the oscillation of your heart at that particular point, the observational pivot point inside of myself is to see who you really are in comparison to your explanation of needing to go into the garden and not being that person. You are that person completely all the time, but the tenderness of your heart is quite unique and inspiring, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know what to say now.
Well, okay, let's see where else we can take this conversation. So I suspect that inside of the space of people that are trying to teach someone else that is looking for, whether it's a parent teaching a kid or a teacher teaching a student, unfortunately there are no shortage of stories of situations where the disparity between the instructor and the student isn't stewarded in a way where it is really safe. I think that the people that have more power than somebody else at times use it in a way that's not, they're pushing too hard, and they're in danger of breaking the more vulnerable person. What is there anything to do about that? Is that just the path of the person that's the devotee or the aspiring human that just wants to become an adult and be competent in their life, and they had overbearing parents or whatever? They were set up in a way that made them feel tremendously compromised, and they have thick walls, and they're not vulnerable, and they don't see life as something hopeful. What would your message be to somebody that looks at the world through that lens?
Well, I mean, those people's, or that person's teacher would basically be the people that they're contacting with, and what they can't express and what they need to go through their teacher will be other people that are in the same field of conflict. I don't think if a teacher pushes you to breaking point, and that's if it's necessary, it's necessary, but you shouldn't do it to the point where you destroy somebody. But you have to have a look at things very, very, very succinctly and very closely, and that may be threatening for somebody. But when you have an agreement with someone, that should be done with an enormous amount of care. But that enormous amount of care doesn't necessarily mean the person won't be shocked by the results of the communication. But I think life works on people when it comes to this, and it's the teacher's responsibility, or the best friend's responsibility, to break that habitual habit by speaking to it as clearly and as concisely as possible, and then take it on board, the result or the reaction. So. That's a hard question to even comprehend, because there's nobody in front of us at the moment that are showing these vulnerabilities and the unwillingness to change. And if they've got the unwillingness to change, would they really be with a teacher? And that's when a lot of cases I've had students like that. They want to learn, but they don't want to change. So it's I guess that's just life, and then you let those people go. And go their way. But I think the teacher for these types of individuals will be everybody that they meet until they break through. And if they don't break through, then they've lost the greatest opportunity that could ever be imaginable by facing these great obstacles. I don't know whether I'm talking correctly here to the question or the.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Joshua.
Sorry, man, jumped into you there. I guess when you were talking, I was considering, and I hope I haven't gone off on a tangent, but the intergenerational trauma that often people are subjected to, and I don't feel that it's ever, in most cases, it's not the parents' intention to lay something on their children, yet it's they're doing the best with what they have, and maybe this is their actions are a result of how they were taught, what they were exposed to, and what they weren't able to break through in their own life, and it becomes this pattern. And then you get children that are born into those families that go through those experiences, and then that becomes the teacher to them. They go, I don't want to be like that. I'm not going to be like that for my children. And there's a big shift. And I've seen that a lot in my generation, and through a lot of my friends, and through some of the stories, that it seems that there's almost like this may be part of this shifting and this lifting of humanity, is that we no longer need to suffer through these repeated traumas. A lot of it's coming to the surface, and for some of us to actually see it and decide not to make that change, we have to almost be subjected to it first.
You're absolutely right, Joshua. Intergenerational trauma is encoded into the DNA. So it's a simple matter of just saying, I won't be the alternate version of my parents, exactly what you're saying, so that I can become a new being, and not a reflection of just becoming something made. I'm a made man by my father. I'm a mad man by my uncle or my aunt or my mother. There's time to break through this, because we know that we're only becoming the alternate version of those particular people. And you're right, everybody's changing. Nobody really wants to make these intergenerational trauma cycles continue anymore, because it's pretty obvious. We need to stop this expression, and the only way to stop this expression is to say be in a state of gratitude, which which opens the DNA up, and you go into a different facets of who you're really meant to be in comparison to that intergenerational wisdom which is meant to come up, instead of trauma.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful, and I'm sure you see that as a teacher as well, with people coming who have had something similar happen in their lives, who then have just made the decision or maybe found you through this path and wanted to make change, and then start to open up through, you know, whether it be the practice of Loban Pi or online conversations like this, that starts to crack and open up that heart space, and some of those things are able to be released through emotion and through just communion, I suppose.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's all I can say to that. It's absolutely true. It's we have to be there for those people who search us out, no matter what. Yeah.
This is something that has been permanently marked on my brain. Was the first time I talked to you, Lujan, in an online spiritual guidance. I've mentioned this on one of the previous podcasts, where it was one of the first times I really felt seen. Like I felt like in some ways it was a type of communion that I'd never experienced before. And I think a lot of people walk through life, I'm assuming, the same way that I did, not totally feeling seen and thinking that you're having exchange with other people, but it's really just your personality interacting with their personality, and your projections interacting with their projections, and it's kind of competition in some way, and you're trying to find validation and acceptance and all of those things, but it's filtered through so many layers of like artifice that real communication is it's kind of the exception. And is there, I'm curious if there's like any advice that could be given to people that don't have a practice like Loban Pi, who've never spoken to you, who don't have friends or people in their lives where they can really unfold, and it's really a safe thing to do. Like how do they find communion for that first time? Like what is
okay. It's pretty simple. I was homeless and I was hungry. So if people don't eat for a couple of days and feel grateful for the fact that they've actually got food, and be grateful that they've got a roof over their head and heating and cooling, because to be grateful for these fundamental things, where we've been made feel very safe and very strong because of it. If it was to be taken away from us, then just go down the street and don't come home for 3 days, and be subject to the weather, be subject to the night, be subject to anything that's going to crawl over you on the ground, and don't eat. And if that doesn't work, then go home and stay awake for 5 days, and realize how beautiful it is to get sleep, and how vulnerable you feel when you break this routine of having a comfortable bed. I mean, this is a great way to bring your vulnerability to the surface. And I've done this. I've stayed awake for 5 days solid, and just stood in the same spot, watching everybody get up and go to sleep, and then go into a hallucinogenic state, because I wasn't doing the same routine as everybody else, and totally put me somewhere else that I didn't expect. So it's just take away the things which make you feel comfortable. Even missing one meal will make someone grumpy. Missing 3 meals will make someone grateful to get something to eat. So it's I don't know. The best thing to say is, if someone has a flu, then they feel sick for a little while, and then they go back to the same old behavior. Just the best way to break our feelings of what would you call it, expectation, unruly expectation, is just to take away the simple things like food and sleep. And then you'll be so grateful to sleep, you'll be so grateful to have something to eat, and then go on the street and not be with the person who truly loves you. And then you'll realize, oh my God, the bed was warm, they're nurturing, they love me, look what I've got. And now look what happened to me. I've put myself into a position to realize that my vulnerability and my securities are two different things, and that's the best way to learn. I think if you don't have a good teacher, then take away the things that make you feel comfortable, and see how you feel after that. And then you'll be very grateful, and gratitude is probably the best teacher you can have. And then you'll find a teacher that has gone through similar things, and then that gratitude will become amplified through being grateful that we're here, and feeling grateful that we can learn, feeling grateful that we can communicate, feeling grateful that we can put our arm around each other's shoulder, feeling grateful that we can listen to it just like now, being grateful that you guys are here, you know. So it's take away all the things that you're grateful for, and then you'll realize how wonderful life is. And for me to have you two guys around me is something I'm so grateful for. Because what would I be without you guys? Seriously, you say, what would you be without me? Where would I be without you? It's all a sacred communion.
Yeah, that's really, really lovely. But there seems to be a pattern, I guess, in the world out there of focusing on what people don't have, what we don't have. The tendency to look at, especially if we look at material possessions and things, what I don't have, what I need, rather than turning to what you do have and feeling that gratitude. And so, yeah, I like it. It's simple, but it seems like such a simple pivot, and yet I know I get caught in what I don't have. And so it's the importance, I guess, of just looking at the simple things.
Yeah, there must be a point in our lives where we lost something beautiful, where we lost security. Everybody has this, and to fully be grateful that we don't have to. Obviously, this is going to be a fear mechanism for that never to happen again. But the fear mechanism is always covered up with gratitude. If you don't have the fear, then you have gratitude. So as long as there's no fear, once the gratitude hits you, that's the thing with this world. There's only fear or gratitude. So we choose either one. Fear produces many different mechanisms. Gratitude produces other mechanisms of realization.
Do you think that suffering is something that it has a place in our evolution as a whole, but that at some point we'll get to a place, provided we don't wipe ourselves out first, that it doesn't have any relevance to where we go?
I think what gives relevance to our circumstance, if we have enough energy to cope, we can cope no matter what. But as our energy fluctuates, we're tested through the fluctuation. So there's no foolproof answer for anything really, because we'll all go through fluctuations, ups and downs, and we've got to be there for other people in their downs, and we've got to be careful on our ups that we care for people who are down.
So the oscillation is necessary.
Yeah, it's really necessary. If I look back on my childhood and say, well, having no food, having not a roof over my head, being abandoned like this was a very, very beautiful experience, because I had the energy to deal with it because I was young. Certainly wouldn't want to go through it now. Even though I have an enormous amount of experience, I know I don't want to do that again. It's a strange world. It's a strange reality, really, when it comes down to it. And I'm being very honest, quite frankly, because I could say, well, I'm through that. I've been there, done that. Oh no, I don't want to do it again, because I know what effect it would have at my age now. So you got to be really honest with things too. Yeah. And knowing that you don't want to go through that, you don't want anybody else to go through that, and that's where our generosity comes in, to make sure people don't suffer. And our planet is not quite there yet to bring people out of impoverishment to get to the point where they generate enough energy to care about their environment. Run out of air there, guys, or environment. So yeah, it's an interesting world, really it is. Very, very interesting world.
I have moments where I understand that I'm on a path, I'm on my path. I understand the necessity. I just like so many lessons just in the last 4 years of my life that have completely changed the way that I view everything. And and transformed what's important to me to some degree, and where I want to go, and all those kinds of things. But I do have moments where the difficulty of everything is so great, and I see this mechanism of growth that we all dance with through our whole lives as something that occasionally I just lose my taste for it, and I don't want to play the game, and I'm not interested in another fucking lesson, and I just want some ease in my life, and I just want to, it's like stop bothering me, like let me do my thing, and the interference of life and external factors, like just leave me alone. That like sometimes my attitude needs to be adjusted, and I don't want to play the game.
That's very interesting, Dave, because you're talking about divine intervention, and divine intervention can only really occur if you let go of, I don't want to be faced with this, I need to do this, I need to do that. Something happened the other day. We've got to get somebody to take over my office because I'm leaving the country, and I want to leave all my equipment in there. And then I run into the woman as I was going to the shop to get some water. And she said, "Oh, did you get rid of your office?" And I said, No, the two people you sent to me didn't want it. And she said, "Well, take pictures of it, give it to me, and I'll put it on my Facebook, Divine Intervention." And I was saying to Miss, "Oh my God, I'm wondering whether someone's going to take my office over." And it's beautiful there. There's I think $18,000 worth of equipment in it. And I looked at Miss and I said, "My God, this is so beautiful. We came to get water. I didn't want to come and get water because, I just don't want to leave home. I'm just like that. I'm like you, Dave. I just don't want to go out, and I don't want to face the guy filling up the water thing and everything like that, even though he's so beautiful." But it was divine intervention. She was there, and she then came and said, "Well, because I got up and did what I really didn't want to do, because I want to stay home and do what I've got to do, because of what I've got to do is quite extensive. And because I went against what I felt, then the world intervened in such a beautiful way through this human being that I don't even know." And she said, she just basically, "Did you do this? Did that happen?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, blah, blah, blah." And I said to Miss, "But this is divine intervention. So lucky we came out today. So lucky we did what we had to do. We could have done it in 4 days, but we decided to do it then, and it was against the grain, and it ended up being beautiful." So it's like I said, the world is very interesting.
It seems like the suffering, degrees of suffering, it's maybe not that changes, but the perspective of it changes, because in one instance you can be completely opposed to what you're faced with, and therefore head on fighting with it, or you can see it, you might move on to see it as something that is an opportunity for growth. Then you might move on to see that it's something that is just occurring. It doesn't affect you on the inside, you're just navigating your way around it. So it's almost like as the perspective shifts, the suffering may not disappear, but its ability to influence you may become lessened. Wasn't really a question.
No, it was very true. It's like, give kudos. It's it's valuable what you said. It's really true.
Yeah. It was just summing up from listening to you guys, and it was painting a picture. So and I can see it in the world around me. I see in the neighborhoods those that are really struggling just to pay bills and survive and look after the kids. And then, we have these wonderful conversations, and we are making our way through life and supporting one another. And it's not that there isn't challenges in that, it's that we have better support systems and more open communication. And really
Josh, there's something very, very beautiful about what you just said and what you conveyed. When my students have burdens, I say, write me an email and I'll listen to those, and I'll acknowledge it and just let it go and delete it and say, I love you. You're doing exactly the same thing, really, because you look at the situation, the story, you're being sent a message, you're absorbing that message. That message can be something other than what it really is, and you wish that it would be better than then the situation that appears right in front of your eyes, you're doing exactly the same as me. So it's so you're taking that reality. So this reality isn't really fostering change or growth. It's fostering resistances and hardships. So you say it can be better. So what you've done with what you've seen is to say, I want the world to be better. When I get emails, I say I want that person to be better. When I see the world just like you, I say it should be better. So what we're doing is putting forward a recitation. The recitation is the mantra. I see this should be better. I don't like what I see. It could be better. That person's suffering. They don't need to suffer. So you're doing a recitation. You're doing a form of meditation, which is relieving the circumstances of your pressure of your body and your mind, saying, well, the opposite to what is really there. You're saying, I wish this wouldn't be there. I wish things were better, instead of saying what everybody says, well, I've got this and I don't care about them, because that's what they're going through. But we're doing the different sort of approach. And if we continue going down this path as a humanity, we'll all be seeing what's not necessary, and then having the power to change what's not necessary because of the group consciousness. Who are the guys with the carts and buggies that are, what are they called? The religious group that wear the old hats and they never, they're
the Amish.
The Amish, yeah, the Amish they'll have a group of people, and then someone gets married. They all get together and build them a house. They provide them with what they need. They support them for the foundation of their life, and that person builds on that foundation. What a beautiful system. So, I mean, we have to be more like this and see what's necessary. All get together and support people on the fundamental level of their growth, so that they don't have to struggle as hard and as long, and that life is too short for this hard and long struggle to get somewhere that ends up nowhere, because love and affection wasn't injected into the hard turmoil of existence. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Does anybody have any final, that was a wonderful final point, but any final points before we wrap this up?
No final points, Dave. We just love you.
I love you guys too. Thank you so much for being here with us, Joshua, and Lujan. Always, it's always fun to talk to you, and yeah, I just appreciate you. To everybody listening, like, share, subscribe, do all the things to help the channel. If you have any questions that you'd like us to cover on this, use the Spotify survey or send an email to info@parallelperception.com. We hope you keep coming back. Lots of love, and we'll catch you on the flip side.